Version exclusive Pokemon. They may seem like they're only a handful, and they are, but they're some of the biggest reasons behind Pokemon's amazing sales and revenue, and the reason why Pokemon was split into two games in the first place, in a way being the cause behind its success. And for some players, these few odd Pokemon really make or break which version they pick between the two. Yes, while for most Pokemon games, the biggest deal breaker may be the mascot legendary Pokemon, Pokemon Red and Blue didn't have that. The version mascots were either Charizard or Blastoise, and while most people probably did pick based off their favorite color or Pokemon between the two, if you were to go back and play the game now, you'd probably want to play your preferred version based off the game's version exclusive Pokemon. So, which version has the better exclusive Pokemon? Red and Blue is simple in the sense that each game has 6 exclusive Pokemon families, with each game having 11 version exclusive Pokemon, making for a total of 22 version exclusive Pokemon between each version. And keep in mind, stats work really differently in Gen 1, as there's no difference between a special attack and a special defense stat. So if you hear something really off with their base stat totals here, compared to what Balopedia or Cerebi say, make sure you're looking at the Gen 1 stat totals, as that's what I'll be using in this video. Also, on top of the version exclusives, it's important to note that certain Pokemon like the Nidorans and the Gen 1 bugs are not version exclusives, but have varying encounter rates throughout the different versions. But since it's nothing crazy and the Pokemon in each version are fairly accessible, it's not really worth looking into. The first version exclusive pair that we have are between the Atkins and Sanchu families. While you may think that Atkins and Arbok are counterparts to Coughing and Wheezing because of the anime, within the games, they're actually parallel to Sanchu and Sandslash. Arbok in this game has a base stat total of 359, while Sandslash has a base stat total of 405. But despite that huge difference, Arbok does have the higher speed stat, which is incredibly important for Gen 1, as the speed stat is what determines the critical hit ratio in Gen 1. However, Sandslash naturally learns Slash, and with an increased critical hit ratio and a base 65 speed in this gen, Sandslash has an almost 100% chance to crit with Slash, making Sandslash incredibly useful on an in-game team in Gen 1. That and it being a really early ground type Pokemon, a type that's really good this generation, which is why Giovanni was the last gym leader of course, makes it so that Sandslash gives the victory to Pokemon Blue here. With there being so many poison type Pokemon, Arbok kinda gets pushed to the back, especially since the best poison type move it learns is Acid, not even Sludge. Next up, we have the Mankey and Meowth families. That's right, Meowth and Persian were version exclusives in Gen 1, meaning that you can't get all of Team Rocket's Pokemon between these two games without trading. Now believe it or not, Mankey and Primeape were some of my favorite fighting type Pokemon, even before Annihilate came into the picture. Cool looking monkey Pokemon that fights with a base stat total of 385, it's pretty cool for its time. However, its only two fighting type moves are Low Kick and Seismic Toss. Seismic Toss does damage based on the opponent's level, and Low Kick at this time is a move with 50 base power, 90% accuracy, and a 30% chance to flinch. It's not a bad move at all, but it's super outclassed by Hitmonlee, a fighting type Pokemon that you can get for free, at a really good level with a really good moveset in comparison to Primeape. Persian has a base stat total of 375, yeah, but its moveset isn't good to learn Slash, with again an almost perfect critical hit ratio. Persian in general has the 4th best critical hit ratio in the entire game at 22.46%, giving it an opportunity to crit pretty much once in every 5 moves, but when it learns Slash, it becomes a late game monster with the guaranteed stab crit move. I'm giving this one to Persian, once again giving Pokemon Blue the point. And hey, if you made it this far, consider subscribing and giving the video a like. I want to make more of these for each generation, so knowing if you guys like or dislike the content will be super useful to know. The Growlithe and Vulpix families, the split fire types, and this one I think is pretty interesting. I thought it was pretty unfair at first, but as I looked into it, I saw how Game Freak tried to level it out between the two. In Gen 1, their stats aren't so drastically one-sided as it is now. Normally, Arcanine on paper without abilities or anything clearly outclasses Ninetales in modern day Pokemon, which hurts to say cause again, Ninetales is actually one of my favorite fire type Pokemon. But it's true, Arcanine comes with a base stat total that's way better than even the starters at 555, while Ninetales comes in at 505. However, in Gen 1, these stat totals are 455 and 420 respectively. As with Stone evolutions, they don't really learn any moves and rely on their own pre-evolutions to learn moves for them. So the level in which you evolve these Pokemon will make the difference. Vulpix has pretty much a similar learn set to Growlithe except for 2 small differences. The most obvious one is that it learns Fire Spin at level 42. While Growlithe doesn't have access to it, and Fire Spin is broken this gen, but I'm going to ignore that for now, and I'll explain why later. But the other one is that Vulpix learns Flamethrower at level 35, while Growlithe, you have to wait till level 50. This makes sense as to compensate for the huge base stat difference. They give Ninetales easier access to Flamethrower. But despite that, I gotta give it to Arcanine. Simply having stats this good and attack stat that helps it deal with fire resistant Pokemon, I think it makes it the better Pokemon in the long run. And TM wise, Arcanine has a slight edge with basically the same TMs as Ninetales plus Dragon Rage, making this the first point for Pokemon Red. However, I will admit this is probably the most debatable one on this list, and Fire Spin may change your mind, which I will talk about in a second. Moving on to the grass pairs, the Oddish and Bellsprout lines, this is actually the easiest one by a long shot. This victory, like the name implies, goes to Victory Bell over Vileplume, giving Pokemon Blue the point. Both are grass and poison type Pokemon, and I don't even need to look at stats or moves or anything, because I know Victory Bell has one move that Vileplume doesn't. Wrap. Wrap along with Fire Spin are completely busted in Gen 1. Wrap basically immobilizes the opponent and keeps attacking the opponent, not allowing them to do anything. And the turn you break free, you don't do anything either. So if the Pokemon using a binding move like Wrap, Clamp, Fire Spin, or Bind is faster than you, you can basically lock them in this loop forever, assuming that they don't miss. And this makes Victory Bell far superior than Vileplume. Why did I ignore it for Ninetales? Well, for one, if I don't show any love towards Red, people are gonna call me a Blastoise simp. But the other reason is because Victory Bell actually has access to Wrap along with Toxic, which in tandem basically destroys the opponent without you having to do anything. It's one of Gen 1's most cheapest strategies that gets used pretty often, and it's what makes Victory Bell a menace in this gen. Sorry Vileplume, you stood no chance here. Electabuzz and Magmar. While they don't have evolutions in this generation, they're still really strong at 395 base stat total. Now, for the first time, Pokemon Red has the clear edge over Blue here. Magmar in this situation is unfortunately a fire type, and honestly, the ones we covered as well as Charizard are just superior in every respect. Yes, Magmar does get Fire Punch, but let's be real, everyone and their mother's just gonna click Flamethrower with any of their fire types. Electabuzz on the other hand is actually pretty good, and unique for an electric type this generation. It has a high attack stat for electric type Pokemon, giving it strong physical attacks that pretty much all the other electric type Pokemon don't have, for maybe except Raichu. But Electabuzz gains access to Psychic, which Magmar does too, but as an electric type, this is unique this gen, as it serves as coverage for ground type Pokemon that the other electric types don't have. Plus, Electabuzz is a bit faster, meaning more crits than Magmar. So yeah, overall, Electabuzz gives it to Red for being a good electric type Pokemon, and not for actually being better than Magmar. And finally, Debugs, Scyther, and Pincer. I think in every way, especially after Scissor came into play, Scyther is the fan favorite bug type Pokemon, with Pincer getting the short end of the stick. However, it's hard to tell if that's really the case in Gen 1. Scyther has a base stat total of 420, while Pincer has it at 430. Both Scyther and Pincer are actually normal type Pokemon in disguise as bug types this generation because that's all they learn, and they both play off a similar strategy, Swords Dance. But who benefits better from it? Well, I'd argue that it's Pincer, because Pincer does have the higher attack stat, but it learns Swords Dance so late compared to Scyther, and Scyther actually has some stab in the form of Wing Attack. Even if it isn't so great, it's still something. Never mind, that's only in yellow. Problem with Scyther is that it doesn't have Wing Attack and its defenses really suck, because it's weak to a lot and the chances of setting up are really not in its favor. But it does have speed and a crazy good crit hit ratio, so maybe? I don't know, this one's really tough. But hey, if we had to continue the trend, I'm gonna say Scyther gets it for the critical hit slash, even if Pincer has the same. Scyther still has a slight edge in my opinion, giving the final point to Red. So, we're at 3-3 here. Who wins? Are we tied? No, god dang it, Blue wins. Did you see how hard I had to try to make it fair? Besides Magmar and Electabuzz, I think every other Pokemon pair either leads in favor of Blue or is kinda split down the middle. But with Gen 1 mechanics, Pokemon Blue definitely has the better Pokemon. And I'm not saying this as a Gen 1 fan. I didn't even expect myself to come in here and side with Pokemon Blue because everyone goes for Red. But here I am, I done my research, and I gotta say, I picked the superior version of Gen 1, for sure. But let me know what you guys think. Which version exclusive Pokemon do you like? How did you feel about the list? And which Pokemon game would you play? Red or blue? Let me know. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Take care of yourselves, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you over on the next video, alright? Later, bye!